Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, Congress finally passes a bill to massively increase access to care for veterans. We take you to the Capitol in the lead up to the vote. Plus, a month after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the Pentagon is trying to pin down what abortion access will look like at bases around the country. Our Pentagon Bureau Chief talks through the latest. And we see the National Guard response to rescue Kentucky residents trapped in the floods. And we get details on who won a $3 billion missile defense contract. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. The PACT Act legislation is intended to help veterans get treatment for exposure to toxic elements, covering everything from burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan to Agent Orange in Vietnam. After an acrimonious back and forth in Congress and following an emotional outcry from veterans and supporters, the bill finally passed this week and headed to the White House to be signed into law. Leo Shane brings us more.
New military toxic exposure legislation that could provide expanded health care and disability benefits to millions of veterans is headed to the White House after Congress this week finalized plans for one of the largest veterans policy measures in years. The promise to address Comprehensive Toxics Act, better known as the PACT Act, is expected to help more than 3.5 million veterans. It's a massive bill, totaling $300 billion over 10 years, and affecting troops who served near burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan, near Agent Orange spraying in Vietnam, and near radioactive sites throughout the globe. The measure was passed in both the House and Senate by strong bipartisan votes, following months of work by veterans groups to get the bill over the line. Officials and advocates of the legislation celebrate it following the Senate vote, saying the bill will help save family finances and veterans' lives after it's signed into law.
15 years ago, when I was appointed to the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, I had a Vietnam veteran come up to me and say, "You're not going to treat this generation of veterans like you treated us." This bill rights that.
Final passage came after Senate Republicans initially blocked the measure, prompting a furious back and forth between advocates and GOP members over funding mechanisms in the bill.
Finally, this Senate is going to pass the most significant expansion of veteran health care benefits in generations. This is a very good day, a long-awaited day, a day that should have happened long ago.
The Senate blockade also pushed veterans advocates to stage an around-the-clock protest on the Capitol steps for 6 days to force lawmakers to move ahead. Advocates at that vigil said the passage of the act was crucial for the veterans community.
This should have been done June 16th. This should have been done June 16th 5 years ago.
President Joe Biden hailed the bill's passage as great news for veterans.
Finally, we're going to do justice to those who we lost, as well as those who are still suffering from being exposed to the burn pits. It's about time.
VA Secretary Dennis McDonough said his department is already at work putting the new provisions in place and letting veterans know how they can access their benefits. The burn pit provisions of the PACT Act have received the most attention in recent months, in part because of the visibility of those injuries. Tens of thousands of veterans from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have developed rare respiratory conditions and cancers in the years following their deployments, believed caused by the poisonous smoke from massive burn pits used to dispose of a host of military waste. Now, under the bill, veterans who served in those war zones would be granted presumptive benefit status for 23 respiratory illnesses and rare cancers believed linked to the toxic smoke. That would speed up disability payouts to those individuals, potentially awarding them up to several $1,000s a month. Veterans who served in the recent wars would also be given 5 more years of medical care coverage under VA, regardless of their health status. Veterans from older generations would also see new support under the measure. For example, many who served in the Vietnam War already have presumptive status for a host of illnesses linked to exposure to the chemical defoliant Agent Orange, but the PACT Act would add even more, including new disability payouts for high blood pressure. And the bill would codify recent changes in how the Department of Veterans Affairs approaches a host of military toxic exposure claims, lowering standards for proof and offering presumptive status for some rare illnesses believed linked to them. Advocates for years have lamented burdensome procedures to get VA to recognize their service-connected illnesses. Now they are celebrating what they hope is a revamped and improved system for dealing with those lingering wounds of war.
And now in news from around the military. The National Guard has been hard at work getting people to safety amid the devastating floods in Kentucky. The chief of the U.S. National Guard Bureau said about 400 people had been rescued by National Guard helicopters from devastating floods in Kentucky that have killed at least 35 people. General Daniel Hawkinson estimated that the Guard had rescued close to 20 by boat from hard-to-access areas.
Obviously, this is an unprecedented level of flooding in this area, which broke previous records, and significant impact on the communities and the loss of life. I mean, our thoughts and prayers go out to all of the families and the communities impacted.
Damage to critical infrastructure and the arrival of more heavy rains hampered efforts to help Kentucky residents hit by recent massive flooding. As residents in Appalachia tried to slowly piece their lives back together, flash flood warnings were issued for at least 8 eastern Kentucky counties. And in the battle over COVID-19 vaccinations, a federal district court judge has stopped the Air Force from expelling or punishing airmen who have applied for religious waivers from the shot. An Ohio judge ordered a halt to punishment, protecting more than 100 airmen who are part of a class action lawsuit against the mandatory vaccinations, and potentially thousands of others. The lawsuit is ongoing. President Joe Biden announced recently that al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri was killed in a U.S. drone strike in Kabul, an operation he said delivered justice and hopefully, quote, one more measure of closure to families of the victims of the September 11, 2001 attacks on the United States.
Justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more. People around the world no longer need to fear the vicious and determined killer. The United States continues to demonstrate our resolve and our capacity to defend the American people against those who seek to do us harm.
The president said in an evening address from the White House that U.S. intelligence officials tracked the terrorist leader to a home in downtown Kabul where he was hiding with his family. The president approved the operation last week and it was carried out Sunday. This is a quickly developing story. For more, visit militarytimes.com. BUD/S goes international. When other countries want to up their maritime special ops game, they call in the SEALs. And that's just what Croatia did recently. NATO says Croatian special operators and U.S. Navy SEALs linked up in the Adriatic Sea to practice underwater infiltration, shipboarding, and beach assaults. And the SEALs learned from the Croats as well. NATO says the two teams exchanged tactics. U.S. Special Operations Forces regularly conduct joint training with NATO allies. Why? So that NATO's most elite operators can perform high-risk ops together. And that's it from around the military. When we come back, the latest on how the Pentagon is trying to respond to the end of Roe v. Wade. Welcome back. Abortion access around the country was thrown into uncertainty after the Supreme Court overturned the constitutional protection of the practice in June. The end of Roe v. Wade created a unique problem for the Pentagon, which has service members stationed in states with a patchwork of different laws, ranging from outright bans to few restrictions. Will service members in states where abortion is illegal be able to get the procedure? I spoke to our Pentagon Bureau Chief Megan Myers on how the Pentagon is handling the Supreme Court decision. So Megan, federal law on abortion has changed. How has that changed then for service members?
So nothing in the immediate changes for service members in terms of on paper what they're able to access. It's more about the logistics of getting those procedures afterward. So before Roe v. Wade was overturned, service members could only get abortions through their medical insurance, through TRICARE, in case of rape, incest, or if the life of the mother was threatened. That hasn't changed. What has changed is that The military often will send women off base to get these procedures if they don't have a doctor there who is assigned to do them. And so now you may not be able to go off base and get the procedures just as simply as before. You may have to go out of state now and take time off and get reimbursed for your travel expenses.
So I'm sure a lot of women, service members, spouses have questions about access, getting that permission to go off base. Do we know what that will look like?
So permission so far is pretty straightforward. Your commander has to approve these procedures if they are something that's covered by TRICARE. And the Army and Air Force specifically have put policies in place so that even if you're getting an elective abortion for not one of these covered cases, that you can still get time off, your own personal time on your own expense, but you can at least get that time off to go take care of it.
Is the military still performing abortions on base?
Yes. The problem with that access is that we don't really know which bases have abortion access, and the Department of Defense can't really tell us either, because it's not a situation where a major military hospital will have an open billet that must be filled by an OBGYN who can do abortions. It's all based on whoever gets assigned there. So a doctor may only be there for a couple years at a time and then move on, and then they may not have someone going forward at the base who can do those procedures. Before, it was okay because you could send people out in town to get them. Now, in places like Texas, places like Missouri, places like Alabama, South Dakota, more and more states are making it harder for you to just go off on the economy and get this taken care of.
So if you are in one of those states that doesn't have access, you'll still be allowed to go off base, right? But could you get in trouble as a service member, as a commander, to get that abortion if you live in that state?
No, as long as you are following local law, it's not going to be an issue. So if you're going if you're based in Ohio, for instance, which has very restrictive abortion laws, and you go to Indiana, as we've heard, stories in the news about people having to do recently, that has no bearing on any legal ramifications that you could have in the military. The other situation is that just because some of these abortions have been covered by TRICARE and other abortions haven't been, doesn't mean that service members haven't gotten them. Service members have been paying out of pocket for their own abortions for whatever their personal reasons are for years. That has gotten even harder in many states where service members are assigned. Texas, all over the place. And so for them, they not only have to go out of state, but they have to request personal leave and pay for all of their own travel expenses. And these are not just cases where someone gets pregnant and they decide they don't want to be pregnant. These are cases, because many of these states don't have exceptions for this, these are cases where there's some sort of fetal abnormality where this pregnancy is not going to go all the way to term, and so you may have to carry it until you miscarry. That may be 7 months in, that may be 8.5 months in, or it may be a situation where you deliver the baby and the baby passes away almost immediately or very quickly. And that's something your doctor would have told you that could happen, but there was no access to an abortion either on base or in your state to be able to get that taken care of.
So for these cases that are not covered, the military is saying that it'll support service members going off base to get them?
Yes, so you are able to get personal leave approved. No questions asked to do that. You do have to pay for everything. Now, there have been some suggestions that you could get around the federal law by allowing women to get these abortions on base and pay for them out of pocket. And there have also been suggestions that maybe the military could cover your travel expenses or let you take medical leave for these non-covered abortions, because that facilitation and even the funding of your travel does not violate the federal law. The federal law only covers the funds that go toward the procedure.
What are you hearing from service members, specifically female service members and military spouses?
A lot of confusion, about any type of abortion and where they're going to be able to get them. And also worries about, am I going to be in trouble if I travel out of state? And even more, concerns about commanders and whether they're going to be involved and whether you're going to have to tell anybody, because before it could be so easy to never let your chain of command know that you were even pregnant. And now if you tell your chain of command, even if they can't deny it, right, you can still get the abortion, but that means that you have to tell your commander that you're going out of state to get an abortion, and you may not want to do that. And one of the other things that's concerning in a larger, sort of retention and family planning situation is there are service members who are concerned about getting pregnant while they're in uniform because they don't want to get pregnant in one of these states where if there's a fetal abnormality and they know that they're going to lose this pregnancy, they can't preemptively go and get an abortion. They have to suffer a miscarriage in order to close the chapter.
states and, the law is still trying to figure out some of these abortion questions. Are there still abortion questions that the military is hashing out, trying to figure out?
There are, in terms of what they can do for service members who want to get these non-covered abortions that they had access to, and now they may not have access to based on where they are stationed. Representative Spear, in that hearing last week, talked a little bit about how they've created this situation where there's unequal access for service members, and that's something that she's concerned, about remedying, because you don't want to create a situation where female service members or male service members' spouses are stuck in this situation, and they may not want to stay in the military because they're concerned about getting pregnant in this situation.
Of the service women currently serving in the military, we'd expect that more than 50,000 of them would have an abortion during their lifetime. And for many of them, it will be during their years of military service.
Was there any other compelling testimony at the hearings?
There was a story from a civilian OBGYN talking about one of her patients coming in, doing tests and finding that this fetus that this woman was carrying had abnormalities that were not compatible with life, and how she had to navigate telling this patient, your baby is going to die, but I can't do anything for you here. I have to send you to a different doctor who you don't know, who doesn't know your situation, in order to take care of this. Or your other option is to carry this pregnancy until it inevitably ends in miscarriage.
Thanks for coming in today, Megan, and talking us through all this.
Thanks for having me.
And now for this week's Defense Dollars. The Missile Defense Agency awarded Northrop Grumman a contract potentially worth more than $3 billion to integrate and manage weapon systems within the ground-based Mid-Course Defense System. That system is designed to defend the United States from intercontinental ballistic missiles from North Korea and Iran. Northrop leadership said the effort will include enhancing the GMD capability to keep up with evolving threats. It will also upgrade digital processes and incorporate the next generation interceptor when it comes online. There are 44 GBIs in silos buried in the ground in Alaska and California. The Indian state-run Hindustan Aeronautics Limited awarded a $100 million contract to Honeywell. The American company will manufacture 88 engines for the HTT-40 trainer aircraft. HAL plans to offer the HTT-40 trainer at about $7 million per unit to the Indian Air Force and other overseas customers. The company told Defense News that it hopes it will secure a $490 million deal in October to supply the Air Force with 70 of its basic trainers. The two companies are working together on potential exports. U.S. Special Operations Command announced this week it has selected the AT-802U Skywarden for its Armed Overwatch program. The single-engine plane is made by L3Harris Technologies and Air Tractor, which is known for its crop dusters. The aircraft will be built in Olney, Texas, and will be configured by L3Harris next year, mainly in Tulsa. The Armed Overwatch program will supply operators with eyes in the sky and close air support. The initial program contract award is for $170 million. L3Harris says the indefinite quantity contract will be worth up to $3 billion. Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack talks about how to save money and earn interest with a certificate of deposit.
If you're talking savings, you've got to talk CDs or certificates of deposit. They're one of the best and most popular ways to make guaranteed returns at a higher rate than regular savings accounts. CDs work well in a savings plan because they not only offer compound interest, but also because they come in a wide array of term lengths. Usually, the longer the term, the higher the interest rate, and you don't need a huge sum of money to open one either. Some CDs have a minimum deposit of just $50. The trick is knowing how long you can go without those funds, since they'll be locked in for the duration of the CD's term, anywhere from a year to up to 10 years or more. Once you become familiar with CDs, the pro move is to open CDs with varying terms, and when one matures, you roll the money into the CD with the longest term to really compound that interest. That's called CD laddering, and it's a great way to save for your emergency fund or even retirement. Talk to a financial institution you trust about your savings goals and figure out which CD works best for your needs and timing. Above all, put CDs in your financial plan. They work hard for your hard-earned money.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next time. To get more coverage of military and defense issues, make sure to check out our headlines every day at Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps Times.com and DefenseNews.com. Prefer to get your news on social media? Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And when we come back, we head deep into space to see how the military wants to track more objects and potential threats in this week's MilTech. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. The Air Force and Space Force are pretty good at tracking objects, such as satellites orbiting near the Earth. But with potential adversaries now sending objects even deeper into space, and in some cases to the moon, the military wants to see better and farther. Todd South has more in this week's MilTech.
As the Air Force and Space Force look high above for domain awareness, they're also looking for technologies that give the services greater range in the vastness of space. To meet that need, the Air Force Research Laboratory kicked off a spaceflight experiment called CHIPS. But instead of California Highway Patrol System, this acronym is actually a little different: Cislunar Highway Patrol System. What's cislunar, you ask? Don't worry, I had to look it up too. The cislunar space is simply the space between Earth and the Moon. Basically, the Air Force and Space Force want to be able to see more and see farther, so the Air Force Research Laboratory launched its search for companies ready to design a CHIPS satellite system to go out there and get some. And by get some, the techies mean provide space domain awareness beyond the geosynchronous orbit. And that's because the area of our solar system that is seeing some increased traffic by other nations such as China that are sending out their own satellites. In 2020, the Chinese Space Agency officials signaled that the nation wanted to have a permanent presence on the moon by 2024. And at the time, the Chinese government did have a rover on the moon dubbed Yutu-2, which landed there in 2019. To stay connected with the rover, the Chinese government deployed a relay satellite. And because of the satellite's cislunar position, it was difficult to jam or target. That was according to a 2020 report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And in that period, Russia and China began a partnership aimed at combined lunar efforts. Russia and China on the moon, together. Some space experts have concluded that that means a moon base of some kind could be featured in military capabilities. Not to be outdone, the Air Force established a project collecting lunar space intelligence, much like the United States already does with geospace intelligence, which looks at activities across the globe in a reconnaissance setting. AFRL, the Air Force Laboratory, is now designing a spacecraft to allow the Space Force to detect, track, and identify artificial objects operating at lunar distances and beyond. Distance to the moon? About 240,000 miles. That's a lot of 5K fun runs. Currently, Space Force sensors can track only objects in the geosynchronous orbit that I mentioned earlier, which is less than 36,000 kilometers or about 22,000 miles, 1/10 the distance that they need to go. That's still a lot of 5K races. Spacecraft, moon base, those are just fun words to say. In the air, on land and sea, or in space? Well, we'll keep following those events. This has been Todd South with Military Times.
And that's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.